Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to the MindTrace Podcast, episode number 8. I'm your host, Ajmal Savari, and today we'll look into the science of education and learning design with our guest, Frank. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the MindTrace Podcast. In this podcast, we're bridging the gap between science and its application in UX. We're having conversations with guests from these two worlds, all with the aim of figuring out the UX of certain industries, how UX can use scientific discoveries, what UX industries can learn from each other, and what questions UX has for science. Our guest today is Frank Leone. I had the distinct honor to share an office with him during our PhD time. Frank has a passion for understanding and improving learning as well as education. He's currently an assistant professor in Neuroeducation and Artificial Intelligence at the Donders Institute. His focus is to integrate insights from multiple disciplines into a coherent perspective on learning experience design, which is the topic of today, and into intelligent educational apps and games. His own background reflects similar interests covering multiple disciplines, including programs in psychology, AI and neuroscience, as well as entrepreneurship in serious games and gamification. On top of all that, he has also received multiple awards for his teaching. In this conversation, we talk about the science of education and learning design. What actually makes a good learning experience and how does it affect learning performance? We cover many topics ranging from AI in education to online learning, all the way to the important effect emotions have on learning. Enough background. Let's get into it, shall we? All right. Well, Frank, welcome. Thanks for taking the time. It's a lovely Friday evening at home, as we've spent most of our time at home lately in this period.
Yeah, that's how it is. That's our new experience.
That's true. And I already have to apologize if James is running through the camera image. Just so you know, it's my cat. You know James, but just if you're wondering what's going to happen.
That's all fine.
And this is also a first for me because it's the first remote podcast recording I do.
Cool. Fingers crossed.
And I'm very glad I'm doing that with you. Because, I really can't remember the last time the two of us actually sat down and had a serious conversation, a serious discussion.
Whoa, that's way back.
It's way back.
Yeah.
Because,
especially not one prepared with 4 A4 questions.
Well, I do my homework, you know that. So do you.
True story. Yeah, no, true story. Yeah, no, that has been a while.
But unfortunately, the days of sharing an office during the PhD times is some time ago.
That's way back.
But not bad.
Yeah. But now, sorry?
But not bad at all.
No, that's true. But now we can just do it over the internet. That's fine.
Exactly.
That's a good way to do it.
Yes, as long as we're all staying healthy.
That would be nice.
But all right, so what today is supposed to be about is about the science of education with a specific focus on learning experience design. And I so particularly wanted to talk to you about this because you're just a great teacher. And not only are you a great teacher from me saying that, you've been awarded for this, and you get really good reviews from your students as well. And it's not only that you get good reviews or things like this, good input. But what I really like is that you try to be very methodical about actually being a good teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm so excited to talk to you about the learning experience design. But let's start broad. Let's start super broad. What makes a good learning experience?
Whoa. Okay. Interesting. In the meantime, there's a cat in between. I think you could answer that question in multiple ways, but let's start with 2 ways. I think a good learning experience is built and it's totally dependent on having a good design. So these 2 parts, you can't do the one without the other. And actually, the design aspect is most often the thing that teachers are not that well educated in, or is basically not their common practice. So basically, being a designer in some sense, and I'm also only dabbling in design, but being a designer in some sense, I think, built an effective and engaging learning experience. But that's a kind of dodging the question, because it basically says, yeah, you should think about it beforehand and have a design. If I would rephrase the question, what are the ingredients of a good learning experience design? It's interesting because science-wise, many design disciplines are pretty empty. And the same is true here. Actually, this entire phrase, learning experience design, is hardly present in the scientific literature to start with. Although there's a quite big group of professionals or practitioners that actually use the term and see themselves as a community. What I often distinguish as a teacher and a scientist are 4 key aspects of an effective learning experience, with the first being a higher calling or meaning, so a higher meaning to the experience you have and higher reason to do it, invoking deeper emotions, invoking connections to the outside world, to the persons involved, basically not being a dot disconnected from the rest of the world, but actually being integrated, and in this way having a higher meaning or a quest behind it. Second, a mere feeling of mattering. That's the other side of the meaning. So the meaning is that something means something to you, and the mattering is actually that you matter to the experience or to the persons, to the people involved. Such as, for example, I find it important, and it's quite a big challenge with a big group, that my students, because then they also feel they basically then start working both for me, for themselves, and for the higher meaning.
Right.
Because they feel they have actually, and that same mattering is also in the case of, if you do an assignment where you feel you're just one of many and it's not really relevant, or you feel that you actually take on a critical role or get a lot of responsibility, you again feel you matter for the setup of the learning. The third one is often called also in classic educational science autonomy. While from a game design perspective, you would rather call it indirect control, sorry. Basically stating that you look for measures of control that are not direct, so not saying to something, hey, now you need to jump, or hey, now you need to do X, but actually try to build triggers in your experience. And that can be basically formulating clear goals and formulating clear boundaries, and giving clear choices and good incentives, but also trying to make an environment and a kind of embodiment that trigger people into the way you set up your the surroundings. It can be basically what kind of music you play, what kind of colors you use, anything like that can basically trigger people into action. Mm-hmm. And if you have those 3 ingredients, then basically you hope people take action. And then what you don't want as an experiencer of the design is basically that you have a feeling of progress, that you feel that you move forward and that what you're doing has an impact.
That's the 4th one.
And that's the 4th one. Yeah, progress. So then we have meaning, mattering, autonomy, / indirect control, and last one is progress. And that's, of course, in many cases, people often think of basically giving points and reaching higher levels, etc. But it's also just noticing that you can do something new, or noticing that you can share what you learned with someone else. And in that sense, any experience where you don't feel you're making progress, especially learning experiences, will quickly fade out, even if those other 3 ingredients are there. So that's how I look at it,
right.
At least.
And is so when you describe this now, this is all from the perspective of the person who's, let's say, the student, the one who's absorbing the information. Because when you say, for example, the first part, like a higher meaning, it could also be seen as the teacher is, conveying this because they feel a calling to do this. But that's not what you mean. You mean like the higher meaning of the content.
Yeah, No, but I think that's also the critical distinction between the classic field of instructional design, which is strongly taken from the perspective of the teacher and from the content that should be conveyed, versus learning experience design, which explicitly takes the perspective of the learner and what he or she finds interesting, what he or she wants, and what he or she feels. And that's also what you should be.
Yeah, definitely. Because if it's, I try to look at it also a little bit from the perspective of, a product consumer or business consumer relationship where whenever the business is trying to make a product, it's not about how they see it. It's about how the customer or the consumer is going to experience it, not what they think, but like that's the customer centric approach.
Yeah, that's actually many of these things I now mention. They're a mishmash of many disciplines, but actually quite some inspiration comes from game design and gamification. And many of those gamification principles are heavily used in industry, but mostly with a heavy focus on the easy and flat stuff, basically the giving points, awarding badges, partly ignoring the higher meaning, and that's also. You have a book by, actually, I think, I'm not totally sure, but I think most of the time of his life, he mostly played games, and now he's one of the most sought after gamification gurus, Yuka Chow. He wrote a book, Actionable Gamification, Beyond Points, Badges and Leaderboards, that's the subtitle, where he basically scores commercial products on different factors, such as higher calling and meaning is also one of his factors. And basically showing or discussing, hey, how is Facebook doing on higher calling and meaning? Not that well. But it's doing pretty well in, for example, avoidance, kind of negative stimulants. Because you don't want to, and that's one of the reasons why you stick to Facebook. Then this is the way you, for example, describe LinkedIn and many other commercial products. And I find those analyses really insightful. And actually, there are not that many scientific models of gamification. And his model is not the scientific model, nor a pretty well thought through model, which comes, at least for me, quite well recommended. Not everyone agrees, but yeah.
Right. So I will definitely put that in the show notes, that book. But can you, for the people that don't know what gamification is, can you explain to them what that stands for? Even though, I mean, the word is a little self-explanatory, but just to broaden the spectrum here.
Yeah, I think it's actually good to define the term. At least for the reason that the term is often misused. But officially the definition is applying principles from game design in non-game contexts. So basically, you design real-world experience or real-world systems in such a way that should trigger the same kind of response as a game does. So, for example, adding points. But that example is actually quite badly chosen because that's what everyone expects. Basically, people kind of see if a platform, a digital platform or anything gives points and leaderboards and badges, people think, hey, this is gamification. While actually also, as Yuka Chow defines it, but also many others, it is basically user-centered design. That's what it is. Because that's what a game does. A game is nothing else than trying to attract people and trying to keep people's engagement and make them motivated to engage. And that's user-centered design. And that's far more. So that's why it's good to actually ask the question, what is gamification?
So when you say it's user-centered design, because when I was doing the research, what I found when I typed in gamification was exactly what you said. It's scores, it's badges, it's leaderboards, basically these principles being used. And in essence, it's, correct me if I'm wrong, right? To me, this seems just like a quantification of a reward. And that's kind of it. And to me, it seemed so much more gamification, or at least how I was thinking about it, of what a game games that are super engaging to me entail more than just that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why I think the terms I mentioned with some of the higher order terms like the meaning and the measuring have far more bearing on what games actually are than all the points and leaderboards. But that's the easy stuff. But that's also within the literature and also within the professional field. There are quite some people now saying we're basically doing it wrong. We shouldn't only focus on the flat stuff. We also should be thinking about the easy stuff. We should also be thinking about this meaning. We should also be thinking about all those other more initially the professional field and also the scientific field mostly went for the low-hanging fruit, and that's the points and the leaderboards. And for example, I think that's because what you say with the quantification, also with the badges, I think that's a good point to think about. So when I once designed a serious game or alternate reality game for secondary schools, and what we did there was explicitly saying each points or badges or anything else, there should actually be a message with it. A message giving you the complement or the reason why you get it, which makes the badge in essence only a mnemonic of the actual feedback or the social reward you got. So then the words you get with the reward is, well, if you only give points and badges, then without the message that actually gives it meaning, it isn't worth anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in that sense, it's also kind of meant as a kind of mnemonic. And the other thing is because many of those things you now mention are actually in the progress domain, a bit in the mattering because the badges gives also a feeling that you matter, but not just in the feedback and progress domain. If you would put it in the thinking I referred to earlier. Well, actually, the most meaningful progress is often not on those points. The most meaningful progress is if someone says to you, wow, you grew as a person, or if your father or your mother or someone in your neighborhood says, wow, you can do something new, or if you really want to be able to do something, I don't know, learn to program, and you can finally compile your first script or compile your first game. That's not the quantification might help, but only in the short run. For the long run, you need that real reward. And in the end, you need a mix. And that's also what Yuka Chow said and other people who thought a bit more deeply about it. Basically, you need a mix of the short-term stuff and the long-term. And for the long-term, you need the higher meaning and the other feelings.
Right. Because I can imagine that, of course, points make it clear where you are along a trajectory. But if the trajectory is too far out, and we worked on our PhDs and we know how that feels. If it's too far out, it almost doesn't feel like you make any progress if the trajectory is just too long, even if you get points, until somebody might come along and give you, like you said, like some person who's close to you, or a mentor, a teacher, a supervisor, a parent, who can then put it into perspective, rather than just you scored 95 points.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever that means.
Yeah. No, but actually, that makes me think back about what you had hanging on your wall during your PhD. Basically, the numbers 1 to 4 for your 4 papers you needed to score. If I would have had those numbers, so I'm not talking about your PhD, I'm mine.
Yeah.
I would have my first paper in my 4th year. So there's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 would have hanged on the wall, hang on the wall for years, not doing anything, just looking at me like, Frank, you're not doing a good job. You're not doing a good job. You're not making progress. Well, as a person and as a scientist, I was for sure making progress.
Yeah.
Not as a person.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's also true as a teacher. So just to bring it back to that topic, if you give feedback to a student, okay, say I get a paper from one of my PhD students, or I get a paper from one of the undergrads, I can give feedback and color it completely red. And then the next time they hand it in many cases, We also have had this experience in the past. You get it back again, completely red. So the sense of progress is zilch.
Yeah.
Especially if, and that's also a drawback of how the education system often works, especially if the focus is so much on the negative. If you times and times again only focus on what is still bad or what can still be improved, you never notice the progress.
Yeah, that's true.
And in that sense, I also try to do it with my students, and I'm not always succeeding. But to again give them the feeling, yeah, you're really making progress. That also means that the post moved a bit, so you have some extra feedback. But whoa, we're getting there.
Yeah.
And that's important to realize as a teacher, and also as an employer or anyone actually.
Yeah, but I can imagine that it's difficult, specifically because talking about metrics again, the metric when giving feedback of writing is always negative. Like, yeah, as you said, it's always negative. It's what can be done better or what can be written differently, which is then almost inherently saying this could have been done better. And basically the scoreboard is built to go in the negative direction because there is no whatever was made not red, make that green. That's not what's happening.
No, I think that's spot on. You have a book by Lee Sheldon, The Multiplayer Classroom. Yeah, I think that's the name. Actually, I just saw on Facebook that the second edition is coming out.
All right.
Again, highly recommended. He's a game designer, basically designing his entire game as this entire class as a game. And he says the classic grade system in the US, which is quite different from us in the Netherlands, but still it's similar in essence, is basically you have an A or you have a 10, and now we're going to subtract because basically only going to look for the negative. Which is again the inverse from progress. And he says to his students, okay, you now have an F, or that's a grading system, you now have a 0, and now we're going to add points. And we're just going to keep adding points until you reach a certain level, giving you the sense of progress. So we now actually wrote a grant proposal to actually basically compare these two grading systems. So it's a negative or average grading system because, that's typically grades are based on averages. And average has a tendency to do this.
Right.
Up, down, up, down, up, down. Moving my hands doesn't work well in a podcast. Up, down. Hence giving you no sense of progress. Well, basically giving you a point system basically starts at 0 and shows you that you're moving forward. And it also means that, for example, if you do something extra, a bonus assignment, or you put some extra effort in or anything else, points can be added. While getting an extra grade, if you, already calculate an average of 10 grades in a day, you get an 11th grade, doesn't add anything. So there's no incentive to do something extra.
That's right.
And I think that are the tiny fixes with which we, if we want to keep grades, can basically help basically the essence of our education system already be more motivating. Because grades is a big part of the motivation for students, regrettably. But
But do you then think... Sorry. Yeah. No, please continue.
There's already basically a design flaw in how we designed our education.
But then do you think so that the standardization... Is it the standardization part that stands in the way of a good experience, or is it the reference or that the current standardization used that's causing this?
What do you mean with the reference?
With the reference of what you just described, with just getting another grade or starting with 0. That's what I meant with the reference, and with standardization, as in you mentioned the educational system in the United States. And when it comes to standardized tests, I don't know any other system that can beat that standardization.
Yeah.
If that is the issue. Or it's just a matter of how it's done.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of everything. It also depends a bit on how strongly you want to change it. So, okay, let's
Oh, you can be as strong as you want here.
So on the side of standardization, in essence, standardization might not necessarily be bad, depending on what you standardize. If I now make an awesome design for education, I'm not sure, or someone else, let someone else do it, probably better. And that becomes the new standard. The standardization is not. But if the standardization is totally aimed and totally meant to control and measure students, if that's the prime goal, then it's going to be bad in all ways possible.
Yeah,
basically, the system is largely based on mistrust, basically following, trying to, assuming students don't want to work and building a system that forces them to work because they have to pass the exams. And we don't care that they forget everything directly afterwards, but then we at least can check the boxes and they passed. Then it goes bad in many ways. At the same time, for what I just referred to with the grading system, there are tiny fixes that can fit in any system. You can have the system completely standardized and still change the grading system to at least make it more motivating. What I often advocate, you can think about the big stuff, but don't forget to do the small stuff, because in many cases it's pretty hard to change education. But these small changes can hopefully already get us a long way.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to think of it like a mountain. It's you can't move the mountain, but you can always take one step to get one a bit up. And that like helps. PhD. Just like the PhD. But then do you think, I agree with you. I don't think standardization necessarily is the problem. As long as it's done with it. I mean, the goal of what is supposed to be accomplished is that has to be asked first. And then it can be looked at. But I thought of No, sorry, please go ahead.
Just to interrupt you.
No problem.
I think that one problem with the standardization is that it often stands in the way of actually having personal contact. So one reason for personalization is actually to make everything kind of fair and equal. But in that case, also trying to a by-effect of that is that any subjectivity or any personal aspects are basically removed from the system, because you want everything to be objective, you want everything to be comparable. Hence, everyone needs to do the same thing. Hence, no one can make their own assignments. Hence, there should not be a deep relationship between teachers and students, because it stands in the way of objectivity. We should all keep our distances, and we should all basically a professional distance rather than an in-depth connection where you actually get to know each other as fellow human beings and learn from each other as fellow human beings. And I think that's we had a discussion a few weeks ago, and there I stated to some extent we might need to step away from the standardization and from trying to make everything perfectly fair and equal, because the collateral damage that it does is just not worth the little gain you get, at least at the long end of the tail.
If you get any.
Exactly. The same is, just to give an example, we have now at our university an initiative to make tests anonymous. So as teacher, we can't see the names anymore of students, which from an objective standpoint is perfectly understandable. Basically, you as teacher then can't use any subjectivity when you are grading the test, except maybe when you recognize the handwriting or anything else. From a formative aspect, basically seeing the assessment as a part of learning, it's of course really bad, because you basically don't know anymore which student is doing well, which student is doing bad when you're grading. And from a personal connection side, one of the few things that allows me to go through, more than 100 exams is the fact that I recognize names and have a personal connection. I'm sitting all alone in that room often, maybe some TAs helping me, or PhD students. But the fact that I still see names is what gets me through those long days. that makes it still somewhat personal. And basically trying to replace us as teachers by kind of making us replaceable by machines, by making everything perfectly objective, makes basically the work for everyone, for students and for teachers, only worse.
Yeah.
And the last quote I want to throw in is, I actually don't know where I have it from. I stole it somewhere, but there was no source there. I think we should think about what if university or school or life would be about improving yourself rather than proving yourself. To a large extent, we're basically now asking everyone to just keep proving themselves in tests and everything. Same is true for me as a teacher or as a scientist, and for many jobs, the same thing. Just prove yourself, which to a large extent keeps you from improving yourself. Mm-hmm. Because you're afraid to make errors, which is a big source of learning. You're afraid to try new things, which is a big source of learning. And basically, the proving gets in the way of everything that makes learning possible, makes improving possible.
Right.
And all those tests is only proving.
Now, I'm glad you interrupted me, because this fits perfectly with what I actually wanted to ask you.
Okay, cool.
This was literally, I wanted to ask you if you think that the educational system, or at least how we do it at the moment, all the problems that you talked about, basically we covered standardization, we talked about the disconnect of the students and proving versus improving. And specifically on the latter part, do you think the problems at heart in the educational system is because it is so focused on learning things that you have to learn things by heart in order to prove that you know this, rather than a focus on teaching you to understand things?
I think that's a part of the problem. And it's also a really weird aspect of the problem, in that sense that all the scientific studies out there show that you basically forget the stuff you learned for an exam within days a big part, within weeks a lot, and within months you don't know anything anymore, close to anything, depending on the course. But so in that sense, the check mark doesn't say
anything, right?
No, it doesn't say anything. So in that sense, it's a weird measure in any way. Okay, maybe this is a bad comparison, and maybe I'm not sure. It probably will work for a big part of your audience, I hope. To a large extent, okay, conferences, scientific conferences, but I think the same is true for professional conferences. On the outside, it's all about the talks. It's all about basically exchanging information and being there to learn from each other in those talks and in those sessions. Everyone who has been to many conferences and you ask, okay, what's the deal with the conferences? They tell you, no, it's all about the networking at the background. It's basically that you get to know the right people and get to know the field and get to know the slang and basically get in the field. Right. And those sessions, many people don't even go there. Many sessions are far more empty than it should be based on a number of attendees. Same is maybe a bit true for school. You basically, all those courses, yeah, sure, you pick something up. But a lot of the stuff is basically the socialization, what happens in the background. But if that's the goal, and the same is true for conference, by the way, happy to talk about it another time. If the socialization is the goal, then you might as well set the entire thing up totally differently.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, and then you're gonna think about, okay, what is the stuff we actually want them to learn within the socialization domain, and what are the learning skills they actually need to learn? Because I think it will be a big part about skills. And for those skills, sure, it will be important to get to know some facts, but often those facts will be in service of a higher goal of learning something useful in daily life, or making a big project, rather than learning content for the content.
Yeah, that's what I think that's what I meant with, or I think that's what I tried to get at, exactly what you said, with the focus of understanding being then, why do I need to know this? What is it good for? And I need to understand the concepts and how they're interlinked, rather than just the sky is blue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. which is not a trivial fact, at least for young kids. No, that's part of the meaning I emphasize.
Yeah.
It should have a higher meaning for actually to have value for you and to help you remember and help you stay engaged. And for a large part, I think and there's another example I would love to mention. It's a bit long story though, so I think I'd rather give. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure?
You have you have all the time you want.
Okay. Okay. There we go. So I had I'll do the full story, and then you can always cut out if you want.
I won't.
Okay, so I gave a workshop in October, and I said to the audience, it was about learning experience time. I said to the audience, you could actually design a full lecture or a full meeting just to invoke an emotion, as I think emotion is a big part of learning.
Yeah.
And in many cases now within the education system, basically we shy away from emotions. Well, that's a big part of what causes personal development. Well, and also actually memorization, but let's focus on personal development here. Is again. So when I went back by train we could still go by train back then. Way back. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try this on Monday. So it was Friday. I thought, okay, I'm going to design a lecture which is totally focused on emotions. And I picked a particularly sensitive emotion, namely vulnerability. And I basically set up a full lecture now, a big part of the lecture, to only invoke this single emotion. I put in some safety guards. I warned the students beforehand, this is going to be a heavy lecture. I totally understand if you're not there. We ain't going to record it. We're going to trigger a kind of feeling of emotion, of vulnerability. So I totally understand if you're not there. Monday morning, 8:30, full hall. Almost everyone was there.
Oh, boy.
A really big chunk of students was there. And I said to the students, disclaimer, as I said, this is going to be a sensitive lecture, an emotional lecture. Let me know afterwards what you thought of it. Let's see what happens. Okay, the first part was still a bit dry. It was a bit about perfectionism and a bit confrontational, but not the heavy stuff. And then I moved to the actual personal stuff, because the first part, everyone is like, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? So I thought, okay, I have to go get over this first part quickly. And then I said, okay, now it's the personal part. And here you also see that I really tried to build an experience. It was also a new experience for me and a total experiment for me also. So I said, okay, I'm now gonna totally turn the lights off. I'm gonna turn my microphone off, and I'm gonna join you in the audience. It was a big lecture hall. I think it was 100 to 120 students. I'm gonna join you in the audience, and I'm gonna ask you now for the next 10 minutes. Just watch the screen in silence and listen and reflect on what you hear. And then I clicked the button, and the screen turned black, and a woman of I think probably about 30 was shown on the screen with the camera pretty close to her face, and she's a spoken word poetry artist, and she talks about her depression. She talks about how it is to be depressed and what she feels and what she thinks. And she does that for about 5 minutes. So she does it really in a really intense way. And after those 5 minutes, and the rest of the room was completely pitch black. This is basically, you saw a really big face in front of you, and that's the only thing you could look at and listen to. And after roughly 5 minutes, the screen turned black again. And there was a single question in white letters on the screen. What do you feel now? Do you feel pity? Do you feel jealous because someone opens up? Do you feel superior because you don't have these feelings? Do you feel inferior because you don't dare to speak up? And some more of those keywords. Second question, so screen turned black again. Second question, what would you do in a similar situation? I would just keep studying and working to try to forget. I would ask my friends for help. I would ask my family for help. I would ask online for help, etc. Then the screen turned black again, and I think the third question was, how do you feel if others? How do you feel if others ask you for help or open up to you? I feel threatened. I feel honored. No, etc. More options. Fourth question: how do you feel if you open up yourself or ask for help? It's a relief. And a few more options. Last option was I feel vulnerable. Next question: do you dare to be vulnerable? Do you dare to say that there's something you don't know? Do you dare to ask for help? Do you dare to propose something new? Do you dare to tell sensitive stuff to other people, which people might laugh at or confront you with? And the last question, and there were no options, do you allow others to be vulnerable? I think it was on the screen for 30 seconds. Black screen, white letters. Okay. Then the screen turned white, and there was a black text on the screen. I also mentioned it to the students. And I just invite you to talk about what you just saw and reflect on what you just saw. And then afterwards, we're going to discuss this some more in the group. Okay, then many students were silent and basically were staring right in front of them. Some students were talking or whispering, some students were talking out more loudly, some were actually laughing. So it was really diverse how basically this part influenced the students. And then after 5 to 10 minutes, I basically sat still without a microphone, still basically sitting among them. I stood up, and the lights were still off, etc. I said to the students, okay, vulnerability you can experience at many levels. On the small level, basically asking for help or saying you don't know anything, don't know something, and up to the big level, being depressed, having other mental issues or anything else, and anything in between. And at that moment, I gave 3 examples from my own life, small, medium, and big, just to show that this is true for everyone, also their teacher. And that was kind of a critical moment. I asked to the audience, what do you associate with the word vulnerability or with vulnerability of what you just saw? At first instance, it was basically tumbleweed all the way. Nothing happened. So I was like, okay, nice idea, Frank. Okay, that's where it ends. But then one of the mentors, the second-year students I invited to join this to support the students, one of the second-year students actually spoke up. And I ain't going to repeat what all the students said because it was highly personal. And
right.
in the end, I think 15 or 16 students spoke up in a whole of 100 to 120.
Oh, wow.
With extremely personal stories. We had quite a few students crying. And actually the stories that were shared there, it was so emotional and so, I think to some extent transformative also for me as a teacher, that I still think back to that moment quite often, especially some of the students who spoke up are still basically burnt in my mind. Only by bringing up the topic of vulnerability and talking about it and sharing experiences, Pandora's box was opened. That was my experience. And then afterwards I said to the students, and I think this was all done, and I think also by the students in a really respectful and open way. I was really humbled by what the students shared there during the lecture. And then after the lecture, after that part, I said to the students, okay, I'm basically gonna stop the lecture in a few minutes because I ain't gonna continue to the rational stuff now anymore. Now it is basically, we should basically talk about these emotions together and basically leave the hall and give this a place for everyone. And not go back to I'm a teacher and I'm going to go on with the lecture.
Right.
But I did explain them why I did it. So I said, okay, all of this, and for many people this will sound familiar, all of this is inspired by the work by Brené Brown, The Power of Vulnerability, one of the most popular TED videos that exist. And I did it for I think roughly 3 reasons. First reason, this was in the context of the academic and professional skills course. So it's a skills course. And for many skills, you need vulnerability. Because in how I define the skills, asking help is actually a skill. Asking questions is a skill. Creativity, which also requires vulnerability, or taking initiative is a skill. Leadership, many of those skills require vulnerability. Hence, it is something you should reflect on and work on.
Just give me 1 second. James has turned you off. Okay, I can hear you again.
That's a nasty trick of James.
Sorry.
No problem. So the first one is it's basically a meta skill or a property that underlies many skills you probably want to develop. And for that, we shouldn't shy away from the emotion, but should actually try to talk about it and basically achieve personal development by working on such an emotion and sharing this. Second reason, in many universities in the Netherlands, and I doubt it's much different elsewhere, there are actually quite big worries about the mental pressure that is on students and basically the load they're experiencing. And often the response is, at least in the Netherlands, basically adding more study advisors, adding more psychologists, and basically to some extent standardizing, but also basically professionalizing the entire problem.
Totally.
Let's put this in boxes, and this doesn't belong in the talk among students box, but it clearly belongs in the professional box. Let's not touch this topic ourselves. With the effect that study advisors, at least one colleague study advisor once told me, she said, many students I meet here in my room don't have a clue how hard other students are having it. They basically say, I have the feeling I'm the only one who's suffering. I have the feeling that friend X is having a great time and finding it easy, and friend Y is having a blast and finds it all too easy. I'm the only one who's suffering. While the study advisor thinks to herself, friend X I saw last week, friend Y is coming over later this afternoon, but I can't tell you.
Yeah.
Because we're all in those boxes.
Yeah.
Hence, this lecture was a way to basically open up and show everyone we're all in the same boat. Many of us have these kind of issues, small and large. Let's get this out in the open so that we can talk about it. And the third reason was these students were first-year students, first course they get. So this is 1 month in their university life. Yeah. So they're pretty young and fresh. It's also to build a group and to make them learn. Hey, you can also ask for help with your friends. You now build your support system and your social support system for later in your study career and also for later in life. And this is something you should be aware of. And basically, please ask for help. Ask for help from your friends. Ask for help from your mentors, from your study advice, from me as a teacher. It's okay to ask for help. We are all vulnerable. And and that was basically the end of the lecture. I showed another video of the same spoken word poetry artist, who can recommend to everyone, but I don't know the name, but we can fix that later. And in that video, she basically explained what happened the one time she did spoke up and how beautiful the experience was. And then afterwards, the screen turned black again. And there was one quote by Brené Brown, something like, vulnerability is our greatest sign of courage. And then I thanked all the students who spoke up, and I stood by the door and basically got overwhelmed by the emotions I got back from the students.
Wow.
I'm curious. I think this is a one-time experience, but this was transformative for me as a teacher, and partly also for the students. What I'd heard back was really many positive comments, and also that students found each other to help each other, and all those things. And everyone who I asked, okay, do you think I should do this more often? They said, yeah, you should definitely repeat this next year. But it's scary, in essence. It's scary that basically asking the question and bringing up the topic of vulnerability in a world where we're continuously proving ourselves shakes up things so heavy and so strongly that this is the response. And I think I'm curious what would have happened if you would have done this in our generation, like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. What would have been the same? And how would it have been 30 years ago? No clue. But and I think this topic and talking about these kind of hard topics should also be part of education, and is more important than knowing, I don't know, the year some famous battle was. Well, basically, this lecture took not much longer than a short introduction in history. And the same is it's slightly different, but still related topic for me. I once asked to a group of secondary school students, what do you want to do in life, or what do you find interesting, and what's your goal, or why do you do the things you do? No clue. Big cars, big houses, fancy watches, and pretty women. That was the answer we got. And if you never ask that question, and just never ask the students, why do you do what you do, they also never think about it. They basically are force-fed all the content you need to learn in high school and other school levels, without any reflection. Okay, why am I here, or where am I going? And there are many schools, many more transformative schools who do better. Mm-hmm. But overall, I think that's pretty typical.
That's quite a story. It's interesting that you say this, because specifically the part of the study advisors, because I was also teaching academic skills, and I was the mentor for first year students of my course. And the rule was this: if there's something in air quotes significantly wrong, you should not do anything but send the student to the study advisor. And I was already thinking, when they told me this, like, but what's the title of mentor then good for? It's this gatekeeper. I don't understand. So then what happened was quite a few times actually is that I had students who I have then sent to the study advisor. I mean, we had in the course, of course, multiple personal meetings. And when I saw already in the first one, something was going not well. I mean, of course, I was asking what it was, but, I was not supposed to do anything about it, even though if I wanted to. And then when I sent them to the study advisor and I noticed during classes, things did not improve, I was just really thinking, okay, fuck this. This is stupid. This, let me ask what's up and see if I can do something. And it really literally what they all told me, it was exactly as you said. They went to the study advisor and then a box was ticked like, yes, they went to the study advisor. Check. And now continue your studies. And I was just thinking, what? You're totally right. These are first year students. They are so young. They just come from school. They are thrown into this new system. They have nobody to talk to. And they are expected to figure all of this out by themselves, which is a completely new social situation. And everything is so distanced from them to make it professional. But I think that's the last thing they need in this moment. They need a friend in this moment. So like an actual advisor who is not sitting behind a desk that's 5 meters wide, to make the distance even further. Yeah. That's not what they need.
Yeah, and the thing, and you don't build social connection based on titles. It's not basically because someone is a study advisor, you get a social connection and you open up. And
no, not at all. Not at all.
And for some people, it might be Asmal they need, and for some people, it might be someone else they need.
Exactly.
But in the end, we should build a social support system as a network, as a complete, as the university as a whole, rather than focusing on these few professionals, because that's, I think, in the end, doing more damage than good. Sorry, study advisors do really good work, but they are a part of the system, and we should use the full system. Yeah. But I think this entire, because that's also a big time the part of the mattering. You basically want to matter as a human being to your fellow human beings, and that's not the fellow human being that's sitting behind the desk as a study advisor somewhere deep down in the building. That's your fellow human being that's sitting in the hall there, basically with you in the lecture hall.
Yeah.
And you should be able to open up to them and feel appreciated by them. But yeah, if the system basically and the entire emphasis on proving basically keeps you from sharing that, then then you get Pandora's box.
And I mean, I thought this was so strange because they saw me obviously way more often than the study advisor. And I'm not trying to say they had a very intimate relationship with me, which they didn't, because you're not supposed to do that. But with whatever students' problems were, I mean, I remember that at one point I was talking to their parents, not because it was requested of me, but because I thought that was important. And it helped. And I'm not saying this is the solution for everyone, or that the mentor, as you said, is the solution for everyone. It's not. But the mentor or whoever is closer has a much better idea with a few questions of what that student needs at that moment, and then just laying the path to get there.
Yeah. No, and it reminds me of again of that video. It sounds like I only have shallow TED videos and shallow books as references, but I think it's most easily accessible. But no, and actually they're not shallow at all. These I'm not sure what the name is, but Barry Schwartz all the tasks a cleaning person has in the hospital, and what basically they ask to the cleaning person, what do you find important in your job? And they list the things that they officially should do. And the things that the
she's saving lives,
personnel
I'd say.
Finds important. Sorry?
They're saving lives, basically. That's what they do.
Yeah, but they're also pretty explicit on that. So, for example, they also say, what I find important is cleaning a few times extra in the room where I know it's actually needed, or not cleaning in a room where someone is close to dying and the family is visiting. And all those things are not part of the job description, but it's basically the job runs the risk of narrowing their mind of what they should and shouldn't do, because that's the boxes that are ticked. Mm-hmm. And the same is true here. You're a fellow student. You don't have anything to do with my personal life. You are a mentor. You're only a gatekeeper. And basically that aspect of, we could call it standardization again, that aspect of standardization is, I think, killing for the fact that we are social beings and we want to feel we matter. Yeah,
I understand. I agree with you. It's this is a nice segue into the next question I have for you, actually. It's a mix of, well, because you and I we enjoy technical stuff as well. And I was wondering, because we've been talking now about personalization a lot, personalization and emotion, and maybe not standardizing so much, or if standardizing, then focusing on specific aspects only with the end goal in mind. Now, you and I know very well, spending in the educational sector is being cut and cut and cut and cut. And I can just keep saying cut for 5 minutes and it still doesn't capture how much money is being cut. Coming to the technical part, do you think AI can be the almighty savior here, which has been promised to be the almighty savior for personalizing education and teaching?
Okay. Most times when I get this question, my answer is that to a large extent AI strong and always AI is implemented to a strong extent actually goes completely counter to building learning experiences. It is focused on, to a large extent, standardizing. Yes, personalized standardizing, but still standardizing. And it's often still focused on basically getting the quickest and most effective way to get facts into your mind or anything else. So to a large extent, I'm actually worried if the tech kids are going to govern the educational system, but actually the focus on experience and learning experience and actually the social aspect will only go further and further to the background. So I think that's actually the aspect that makes learning effective, but also long lasting, and also in the end motivating, and keeps you alive and happy, which is I think more important than all the other aspects. So I for a big as it's currently often implemented, it's actually more a risk and a threat than a savior. In theory and also partly in practice, I do see options that could well help. Maybe not directly AI, but things like virtual reality and augmented reality are ways to actually build experiences. But also even something simple like what we now have. Say you're having okay, this is maybe a bit a long shot, but okay, there are many smaller examples of this. But say you have a course about history in secondary school, and you read and people during war have a hard time. Oh, no shit. You don't feel anything. You give some numbers, you still don't feel anything. Okay, now instead you have a few options which you could do where technology can help. Technology in the broad sense, not even specifically AI. One thing you could do is talk to someone who actually lived during, for example, the war you're talking about, Second World War. Find an elderly person who still remembers something from the war and talk with the person. That might help. Second option, you could actually, try to set up, which is a long shot, but try to set up a Skype call to someone who talk to that person, ask how it is. Third option would be, and actually there are, I think, some AR videos even on YouTube, I think, from, for example, Somalia or a Somalian city after the war, and look around. That's experiencing. And I think also there, history lessons about facts just don't cut the cake, or how you say it.
Yeah, they don't cut it.
It should be about experience. Yeah, you should feel it. That makes you actually, almost puke if someone tries to again set up parts of the population to or basically increase hate among the population, because you felt how bad it was last time someone did that. When you, for example, learning about the Second World War. Right. If you only learn facts, it doesn't do anything. And there, I think, by creating experiences their technology can help a lot. And part of it is also AI. Sure, that you also need image processing for this and stuff. But that's only a small part of where AI is used for and technology is used for. And I hope that will shift.
Yeah, I hope so too. But it's I mean, what you just said reminds me of this quote. I also don't know who said this, which was one person dies is a tragedy. 1 million people dying is a statistic.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And it's literally, it gets diffused away. The impact of the event is diffused away by often the horrifying nature of it.
Yeah, and for example, I was in Boston, and you have many of those memorials. But there was actually a memorial where they, like they often do, basically list all the numbers, basically the identity numbers of all the people who died in certain concentration camps in Germany, and there were basically humongous towers. Basically glass towers, which just stood there in a small park, and that already gave me a better grasp of the sheer quantity than seeing those numbers on paper. That's actually we have a project running to try to build a serious game that actually gives people better grasp on large numbers, because people are notoriously bad in understanding big numbers. Because again, you need an experience of that number, and not only learning what it is, but basically our entire system isn't geared towards learning sheer facts. They're geared towards learning from experiences and using experiences to build kind of a network of understanding of a meaningful world.
Right.
And for that you have to. I think for that the technology can help. But it again starts with a good design, and for that we shouldn't give the WizKids because we say we can crunch data and make you optimize the order of the words you learn for vocabulary.
Right.
That's not the experience.
There was, just to add to what you just said, when it comes to numbers, there was this, I also don't remember who did this, but I think it was a team of artists or just one artist. They drew on the beach in France, at the Normandy, the amount of people that died that day. They drew them on the beach. And it was, you can look this, so to the listeners, you can look this up on Google or Google Images. You will find this picture very quickly. It's crazy. It's really, you see this and you have to pause. I just couldn't say anything for like quite some time. That's how confronting this is. Because we're all very bad at just imagining these numbers. So I encourage everyone to just look at that as well. And then you experience immediately how bad you are at imagining these numbers.
Yeah, and in that sense, imagining experiences where you weren't there yourself. And I think that's exactly what education should be largely about. And I think, okay, what will be I think I can imagine many listeners now think that that will cost a lot more time per individual thing you want to learn. Yeah. But that single thing and all the implications of that single thing you learn and how it generalizes and how it's related to other things, and also how it influences the person itself. All those aspects will be far bigger and deeper and more long-lasting than all those single small facts we now pump into your mind and you quickly forget.
Plus, I mean, we know from research that if you pump these facts and you tie them together with the emotional experiences, they're also longer lasting.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
This is, yeah. Okay, coming back to the AI question. I mean, I totally agree with you. And here's the follow-up question that I have is, do you think, and you kind of answered this already, so don't worry, there's a follow-up on this one as well. But do you think technology in general has become an excuse for bad learning experiences?
I think, I'm not sure excuse would be the right word. I think what for me stands out in many cases, also if I interact with teachers who are all doing a great job and trying to do a great job, they're often not educated to be designed. And if you're not I think to apply technology in a good way, but actually to apply any learning tool in a good way, and build it into a system, technology and social aspects and the environment and everything. You first need to design, and in many cases, technology offers seemingly easy solutions. Same is true, for example, for serious games. Serious games basically appear to offer a kind of, here you have a package. You just run the game, and students will magically learn. And it differs a bit between games and setups, but there are indeed some review papers that show that in many cases, the effect of games mostly depends on how it is introduced and how it's discussed after with the teacher and in the class. And that is basically part of the design. How do you put the game into context and how do you actually employ it for the learning goals you actually have? So in that sense, I think the apparent ease of technology is misleading, and that leads to bad design and maybe an excuse for bad teaching.
Yeah, because so the reason I'm asking this is I have experienced it as an excuse. I don't know if it's an intentional one, but as more like, and I don't even talk about AI. I just mean the simple fact that now you have, let's just start with the change in way you can communicate with students, which can even introduce more distance rather than reduce it. Email. I have received WhatsApp messages from students where I thought, okay, this goes a little far. I mean, this is my phone number. This is, we need to have some boundaries. And, but for example, I have, and the science community, I think, suffers from this as well. Just by thinking, oh, I made the content available, you can download it on whatever teaching platform university or a school is using. Ergo, you should know the material. You should have understood it, etc., etc. You know, I've seen this happening a lot. And I still remember the time when there was no internet or these types of systems when I went to school. And then this type of an excuse was not possible for a teacher to give. And I've seen this now, having been a teacher myself. I have seen many use it. I'm not saying it's necessarily because these are bad teachers, but I think it has to do with spending is being cut so much that teachers are just on the brink of collapse. Not even overload. They are overloaded for years. Collapse.
Yeah. I think that's part of it. I think in addition to that, or maybe that's a different way of phrasing what you said. Many teachers basically mostly think about instructional design, and I think that's for sure true in university, where we're all far too cognitive and far too geared towards content, not thinking about the experience. And the same is true for the management higher up, or the computer people who select the digital systems we use or design them. Actually, it's geared to being practical, to convey content, not to build experiences. Mm-hmm. And each time I try to build an experience in our LMS, I turn away totally frustrated because it's not doable. It's all geared to being functional, not to give you the feeling of a journey or give you a higher meaning or anything. Functional. So in that sense, there's a pressure from top down to use fancy tools because, man, that looks good for the outside world and we can check another box.
Yes. Happens a lot.
And which is, happens a lot. Yeah, which is strongly geared towards being functional. And teachers who have a focus on instructional design, not less caring about experiences, which is also a different, almost, it is a discipline in itself. It's quite hard to build experiences, and then indeed you're totally right. It costs time, quite a bit of time, and that's also and requires experience in itself to build up. And if you press it for time, then it's not the first thing on your mind. Well, in many cases, if you actually the lecture I just told you about was pretty light on prep. It was, I quickly found the videos. I quickly made those questions. And I think it was one of my more efficient lectures. And many of my working groups are also pretty light on prep because many of the things I designed come from the social interactions between the students. Mm-hmm. So it's also partly just a different mindset.
But where do you think now, given the times we're in, with talking of distance now with the social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic, where do you think now the link with technology, in this case then being online courses or these video chats, can open a door into maybe approaching it differently, or maybe being a slippery slope into doing the same thing, focusing on content and just using a technology again as a crutch to bridge until the next collapse comes? And this collapse, I don't mean necessarily a pandemic, but just the next collapse in personalization or personal contact or whatever it is. Yeah.
What I now seeing happening at our university, and I think also elsewhere, so basically everywhere, this is a big boost for all distance education. And in some cases, I think in many cases, it actually can work out really well. Just to give an example, I'm not sure where I take this example from, but okay. Basically, the difference between getting a course taught by a teacher standing in front of a room with, I don't know, a lecture hall with 150 or even more students, or actually, which is actually interactive because you can actually talk with the teacher and everything, but it's with many students, versus having a video of that same person, but then just as close as we. And students often say that they find the second far more personal because they see a face and they see it from up close.
Right.
While you don't have the interaction. So in that sense, you can do many positive things now. And I did it before the COVID.
That's interesting.
But I had it for a few working groups where actually, instead of telling my TAs, hey, you should explain the meaning of this working group and what they're going to do in this way, I said, I'll send you a video and you can just play the video and I'll explain this meaning. And I got back from a few of the mentors. They said that the students really loved it because they felt that I took the time to record this video. So I kind of made them feel that they matter. And it felt a bit like I was in the meeting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's also if you, so in that sense, digitally you can sometimes do more than you think.
Whoa, that's interesting. That's super cool.
Yeah, if you think beyond the content is the same. I could also just make this into an announcement. Just type text.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there can be many positive things, but I think one big discussion point, which is now happening at our university and probably also, and for sure in the Netherlands, also but probably also at other places. One big thing is the testing, because doing tests, the entire proving, basically is based on mistrust. And if I actually now would give you a test, I have hardly any way to, especially not if I don't have classes for hundreds of students, have any way to track whether you're not using your phone in the meantime, not using your book in the meantime, not talking with friends in the meantime, etc., etc., etc. So we should, to some extent, if you want to do this well, we have a few options. Or we go totally to the mistrust side and say we're going to use online proctoring systems, basically having a camera on your face all the time. The microphone has to be on while you make the exam. And your screen
is being recorded.
Yeah, indeed. And each time you I don't know, scratch your nose, the system sounds an alarm. He's doing something which he shouldn't be doing. Please check this. And you basically have observers who try to check the webcams and you try to make sure everyone does what they do. That's one side.
I've been asked about this, by the way.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, that's exactly said. Yeah. And that's one side that our university is now also looking at.
It's this thing. I think it's crazy.
I totally agree. Yeah. Now, one thing we said, and we're now writing a text about it internally for the university, we as Teaching and Learning Center said, let's have this discussion. Shouldn't we trust our students? And shouldn't we basically, I know one other university in the Netherlands did that. They basically asked their students to sign a declaration that they will basically not attempt to plagiarize or anything else. I talked to a colleague the other day, and he said, yeah, I taught at Harvard, and you basically have an honor code that you just don't do these things.
Yeah.
So you can give people an exam to take home, and they don't plagiarize or do anything else they shouldn't do, based on a mutual respect and a mutual trust. And then you're gonna give do your testing a lot differently. And the third option, which resonates with the second one, the third option is basically design your courses in such a way that the testing is an inherent part of the course itself, and not as summative as one single test at the end, but it's also integrated in the bigger picture. But that requires quite good design. So earlier this week, one of my colleagues suggested, hey, maybe we should set up exams that are actually linked to an assignment students made themselves. So, for example, in my course, students need to write basically a scientific paper. And now we're going to set up an exam, which is actually the questions are linked to what they wrote in their exam. So, for example, how did you do X in your paper and Y? That's a hard question to plagiarize.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Totally.
Yeah. And it's a really good check for us when they actually understood what they wrote down. So basically, it's a double win on both sides.
Yeah.
And sure, we still need to trust them that they are who they are. We ain't going to check whether all the faces are the faces. We ain't going to use webcams. But basically, it's by using a different kind of design, we can hopefully force them. It is indirect control all the way.
Encourage them.
Encourage them, take it, do it fairly. And that's also, if you dive into the literature, there are quite some papers who show that the more as a teacher you emphasize grades and the exam and rules and restrictions, etc., the more people plagiarize. And the more you emphasize intrinsic motivation, responsibility, the higher goal, the reason for the course, the less they plagiarize.
Yeah.
And in that sense, this if we because of this entire transition need to build the testing system more on trust, this could have a trickle-down effect or an oil spill effect over the entire setup of the education if we build it on trust.
Which would be great. I mean, I totally agree with you, because when I came to the Netherlands and I had to be in the lectures, I was thinking literally, what the fuck is this? Why are you taking my own responsibility away from me? Because I signed up to study here. It should be my responsibility, my own judgment call, if I think I will need this lecture to learn something, or if I think I don't need this, I already had this, or I read this book by myself. It's a matter of responsibility and allowing the student to have it, while you as a teacher trust the student to be able to make that call. And of course, the studying process is then also you being able to make better predictions of you making this call. Because certainly there were times where I made the call and I made a wrong call. But sure. I definitely learned from this, and I made sure I caught up, or I made sure to then not go to other classes. But when I was teaching, and my first question was, do the students really have to come to all the courses? They have to? Yes, they have to. Why? Because they have to. Okay. Yeah. And then I had to make a list and student list and stuff like this. So so for me, it starts already there. Because it's part of the experience as well. And talking about online courses, I did a lot of online courses. And of course, for me, I did them for let's call it, I knew my why. I knew the higher purpose of what I wanted to get out of this. But it was tangled in with, it had to matter to me as well, which then is also the own responsibility and the trust relationship. Because in the online course, nobody cares if you watch the video or not. It's up to me. And when it comes to the testing, it was also an honors code, but there the code was that I thought this was quite interesting. You could retake the test as much as you wanted, but the questions changed each time. So they were literally geared towards you should understand these concepts and not just have learned things by heart. And I thought that was great. And all of this in combination with each other, I thought is unbeatable. You don't need to hire all these, let's just call them teaching police enforcers to see if you're cheating, because it's I think it's a fool's errand to go down that road. It's dumb.
I agree. It is a bit tricky though that many of these online courses have a dropout rate that goes through the roof.
That is true.
It of course works for people like, especially people like you. It works like a charm.
But I think
I think that's partly also.
No, you're right. Yeah. You're right. It's in here. It shouldn't be. You're totally right. They have a very high dropout rate, but a lot of them are also literally geared towards just deliver the content and that's it. There's no emphasis or adjustment to the medium that has changed. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, it's like me trying to describe a picture in a podcast. It's like, it's not a smart way to do it. No,
I get it. And I think the most important thing which live teaching can do better, but we often neglect, is again the sense of community, because I think that's the thing that gets you through. Okay, bad comparison, but as we were talking about Normandy earlier, where is this from? I don't know. I'm not sure where this fact comes from, but I think this comes from a book. The book is only available in Dutch, but de meeste mensen deugen, or most people are good people, by Rutger Bregman. And he refers to...
I strongly have to disagree with him, but I know the book. But no, please continue.
I strongly agree with him, with capitals. Really strongly with capitals. So a big recommendation from my side.
Oh, wait. Deugen means are good people. It doesn't mean they are submissive.
No, they're good people. Yeah.
Oh. Oops.
Fair enough. It's also not a word that we often use. So most people are good people. That's the meaning.
Yeah. Okay. No, with that I can agree. Sorry.
Okay. No problem. So, but he said that during the Second World War, the Allies, the English and the Americans, tried to convince many Germans to basically quit the war with many propaganda, many pamphlets, etc. And afterwards, the scientists basically checked, what was the impact of all these campaigns, and why did this work or didn't this work? It basically didn't work. And what all those people, what the response was from the German soldiers was, my friends. And that's what the German army did really well. They basically built strong friend ties.
The camaraderie.
And that's also what you have. As I said, it's not the best comparison ever. But in essence, you want to build this sense of community and that you matter to the bigger group in your education, online, which is hard, or in real life, which is a bit easier. But not if we basically treat the education system as we're only focused on content, we're focused largely on individuals, and we don't think about the bigger picture and the connection between people. And another thing, making things obligatory. If anything makes teachers lazy, then it's making things obligatory, because then you don't have to try to make it interesting anymore. You don't have to make any propaganda for your course anymore. You just have to do your little trick. And the same is true with basically a lot of aspects of tech. In that way, as a teacher, basically your job almost automatically reduces to just bringing the content, because there's a clear end goal. You don't have to do anything fancy there. You don't have to think about any design or anything. Simple. They have to go to the lectures or the meetings, and they have to make an exam at the end. You're done. So making things obligatory is one of the worst things you can do for both teachers and students, in my opinion. Yeah,
no, I agree with you. It's so many discussions with former colleagues. It's I just have a few more questions if you have the time.
Yeah, sure. Not sure what time it is, but
it's 9:45.
As you had 4A4, I expect quite a few still.
Well, we don't have to go through them all, because I'm sure this is not the last time we got to have a conversation.
Oh, that's good.
But okay, I've been wondering about this for a very long time, and it's principles from psychology that are known for decades. I'm not sure if I can say century by now, but for a very long time that we know of. Let's just call it attention span insights. Yeah, that we know how those things work. We know principles of memory. We know those things. Why aren't any of these principles utilized in designing a learning experience at all, I must even say?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's pretty hard to answer, I must say. So one thing is the big divide between different fields, and especially the big divide between the more fundamental sciences, because quite a few of those things you mentioned actually come from cognitive science originally,
right?
And partly from education science, but for a large part from cognitive science. And basically the gap to educational practice is in essence really big.
But even those courses, even the teachers that know these things don't take them into account.
Yeah, but I think that's a really human aspect. That's okay. What I always have if someone is a really bad presenter, I always ask myself, okay, if you would be in the audience now, would you actually like this? Or do you just not implement the things? Basically, are you aware of your own lack of skill here? Or basically, do you have a totally different taste than me? Or what happens here? And I think in many cases, it's easy to know something. It's a lot harder to apply. It's actually, in essence,
that's fair.
The flip side of experience. So I don't think that's any different here. Another big aspect, I think, is I was talking to a teacher training earlier today, and she said, at least in the Netherlands, there's not really a training for teacher trainers. So, you also run in a bit into, okay, where does it stop? But, so in that sense, you just might miss a lot of that content not arriving at the right place and in the right format. And thirdly, what I don't know. So as I said, I don't know the answer to this question. I do totally agree to this take. Another aspect might actually be that we are now pretty used to all knowledge being everywhere and always accessible. That's not that long.
Yeah, that's not long at all. It's super recent.
That's pretty recent. That's far more recent than many of those findings. And then if you have such a big system like the education system with many individual schools, but also individual teachers who have largely their own responsibility, a bit like academia, actually, to set up their courses. And you have many, actually, especially in the Netherlands, I'm not sure how it is elsewhere, many big publishers that control a lot of big part of the education. Many of those, it's just an extremely hard to change system, extremely hard to change, especially with the limited time and limited budgets. Yeah, so that's a tricky one, but it's also it's mind-boggling. I agree.
Yeah, I think something we should. Yeah, maybe it's because there's just so little time that teachers just can't really. It's easy to go with the flow than try to push the mountain. And I just remember when I wanted to change something very little, I would even say in minutia. They were like, no, you cannot do this. Why not? No, you cannot do this. Because then it's not unified anymore with what all the others are doing. And I was like, isn't it? Okay. And there you go.
There you go again. Yeah. But there's also another unexpected hindrance for change here. And that's actually the students themselves. I had it once when we were making the alternate reality game for secondary schools. Sure, the design was far from perfect, but I think there were some really nice things in there. But the students, it was actually geared towards teaching entrepreneurship to secondary school students. The students got a lot of personal responsibility. And the teachers had to give quite some freedom and responsibility to the students. And from both sides, this was new. But it were in the end the students themselves who were the first to ask, can we please get a bit more structure? We're not used to this. And the entire what is normal and what is normal in other courses or what is normal in the earlier school system you did or any other system you were in, attracts everything back to the status quo.
Yeah. That's status quo bias, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's extremely hard in the education system for any single teacher to change. And I think at least in the Netherlands, the schools that actually went through a big transformation and are now basically having different systems and having a big impact on the students and also on the education system as a whole, I hope, are often led by visionary managers who basically say, okay, we're going to do this with all of us. And then it's possible. Any individual, almost it's close to impossible.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Then one of my last questions.
Because actually, one effect actually I would say that should be used more, but it goes a bit counter to what I said earlier, is retrieval practice. We've known for ages that actually, or quite a long time, age is a bit long, but that testing is the most effective way of learning. So you basically, that is actually a reason to do more tests. Not sure I'm in favor of that, but actually you should make sure that you have an educational design that can be tested something else that actually requires people to retrieve the knowledge they have, because that's the way they learn. But that's also hardly applied.
That's true. Yeah. That's you actually went with answering one of my final questions, which was which principles can we use to make things better. No, I think it's the retrieval, certainly. I think that's one part of the memory principles, excuse me, that we know. I think attention span is one thing. I think changing up the type of input that's given, like having a very monotonous voice and talking like this for 2 hours straight. Yeah, no way. Even the most skilled person he's super focused is gonna pass out. And I think a lot of teachers are not trained in those disciplines. And I'm not saying you need to be a clown in front of the classroom. You don't have to be that. But there are certain principles of engaging that are very well known, and they can be used to make things nicer when it comes to the content, delivery of the content, the design, to actually have, as we started out, think about how can we create an experience first and have the rest flow into that, rather than how can we fit in as much information as possible into 60 minutes. It's not that way.
No, I agree, and I think for that the fact, at least in the Netherlands, but I think it's everywhere the case, the fact that design schools are so distinct from other schools and universities is actually because it's the kind of design thinking of an entire system and all the aspects of it, and the how those different aspects interact to build a single experience that builds engagement. That's not what we, for example, as scientists, we have the tendency to tear stuff apart and only look at the single parts. So also those single phenomena like retrieval practice or attention span, all those things are bits and pieces, which together should build a system. And none of our scientific studies can show how those things interact if you actually put them all together in a system, because for that it's in essence too hard and too complex. Then we indeed, which is basically designing stuff and seeing how it works and measuring kind of the impact, which doesn't tell us much about the single aspects, which we are used to in our experimental kind of research, but does show in practice how things interact in the bigger system. And basically, those things the scientists should think about, okay, these should be the ingredients. And then the designer should come along and, okay, let's try to package these ingredients with a big design sauce and see what happens if we put it into practice. And then probably quite a few of those aspects will actually fail in practice, or they will cancel each other out or anything. But we should think about the bigger picture.
Yeah, and we should definitely try it.
Yeah. And that's what all those learning experience designers now around the world are trying to do. And the awesome thing about that community is that it's so diverse in backgrounds. There's so many, basically, there are teachers there, but there are also designers there, and artists, and neuroscientists and computer scientists. Many people come together there to basically try to think, okay, what if we bring our minds together? What kind of experiences could we build, and what would be the impact, and how can we build lasting impact? And not only think about not think like a scientist or an engineer only think about the single parts, but think about how it feels.
Yeah.
Which is I'm not sure I should say that too often to my colleagues at university. Thinking about things, how things feel. It's too squishy.
Yeah, well, that's why you say it towards the end with the context of everything you said before. Then it's not so squishy anymore.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. That helps. I hope.
So you've also mentioned quite a few resources. I'm going to put all of those into the show notes as well. That would be, yeah, I think that's going to be super interesting for the listeners that want to learn some more.
Cool. That's fine.
Frank, man, this was great. I could go on for hours and hours. I still have more questions, but I think this is good for the first part.
Yeah, I think this has been long enough for the listeners. Sorry for that.
No, you don't. No need to apologize. Man, do you? If people want to find you, where can they? How can they reach you?
That's a good one. That's the kind of thing I never have time for because I'm also a teacher.
A good one.
They can find me on LinkedIn, so let's put that also in the.
I'll put that in there. Yeah.
And they can also find me on Twitter on the website of the university, and you can also put those in the notes. I'm not that active on Twitter. It's always something that is too low on my urgency or important. No, yeah. Maybe now, actually, with being at home the entire day with a 1.5-year-old, I might sometimes tweet something because I don't see any people, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But happy to talk about these topics and happy to help people along and have discussions about how we can help our youngsters and also other people, actually, because we should learn our entire lives. Help them hopefully transform the education system, because it's such a big aspect of our lives. That's why I said that what if university, what if school is about improving rather than improving ourselves? What if life was about improving ourselves rather than improving ourselves? And if we can together make that happen, that would be awesome.
I totally agree. And this is a really good note to end with. Frank, again, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, man. That was cool.
To everyone listening, you have now a great evening or great day. Hey everyone, just one more thing before you go. I hope you enjoyed the show, and to stay up to date with future episodes and additional content we share, you can sign up to our blog and you'd get an email every Friday. Why Friday? Because it's almost weekend and we want to give a fun end of the week bonus that you can also talk about during your Friday afternoon drinks. It'll be a short email with our latest updates about bridging the gap between science and UX. The content we share ranges from conversations between UX and science, like we have on this podcast, our own journey from scientists turning into entrepreneurs, all the way to our own studies where we dig deeper into concepts of UX. If you want to receive that to stay in the loop, sign up at mind-trace.com/blog. mind-trace.com/blog.